Ms. Snow, what are your thoughts on what Mr. Rose just said about that fear factor and the fact that he's had police officers calling him saying, hey, what can you do to help this so we don't have another situation in Ferguson here?
Well, anybody that's in law enforcement, you always realize that you have plans to deal with emergencies, hoping that you will never have to use them, but you have to build those relationships before that emergency arises. That same philosophy should be applied to our community relations. While everything's, not at a heated moment, take the time to build relationships, establish relationships with the community leaders, with the citizens, with the children, with everybody, so that when something happens, they trust you. They feel that they can come to you, and they do have an open door to come to you. There were incidents that I dealt with that I had already built relationships with various members of the community. And when those high-profile incidents occurred, they knew that they could call me, and I would speak with them. And the only thing that I would ever ask them, give me time to investigate, and I promise you I'll get back to you. And they would do that. And it kept a lot of problems down, because they're going to get a lot of different information. There's always three sides to every story: your side, my side, and the truth. They would give me an opportunity to try to find the truth before things got out of hand. And it kept a lot of things down, but it was because those relationships were there before something popped off.
So in other words, if that trusting relationship is there, but we do have some police officials that are here in the audience, and what is something that you could tell them to say, hey, this is how you build that trusting relationship with the people in your area before something bad were to happen, and you won't have to rush to bring everybody to the table and talk once everyone is heated?
I can truthfully say I'm not really a lot familiar with what may be going on in the area, so I can only tell you what has worked for me in the past. And it may be a bit different, because the community that I policed in, I grew up in, I live in, I still live there, went to school there, went to church there. So a lot of people, they knew me all their lives, so I might have had a head start on a lot of people. However, even from the time that I was a patrol officer, the reason I became involved in police work was because of things growing up in the Inslee community that I saw that was not right, that police officers were doing. At the age of 14, I decided that's what I wanted to do, because I wanted to make my community better, not to sit around and complain about it, but to be a part of the solution. So at each level of as I rose through the ranks, interacting with the community was always important. When I worked a beat, I had houses that I knew that I was going to stop and get a meal, and hated when they moved me to another beat, because those people couldn't cook as well. So I was interacting with them at the sergeant level, and actually the city of Birmingham. I can't take credit for some of these things were in place when I reached commander level, because of things that had already gone on in the city of Birmingham. Anybody from that area remembers, I think it was 1979, Benita Carter. When she was killed in the Kingston community, Birmingham was in a riot situation. But the mayor that was elected that following year, that same year, which was Mayor Richard Arrington, his election came about because of that to a heavy extent. But he put in place a police community relations committee of people, citizens that were trusted within the community. They met, they had access to the mayor's office, they had access to the chief's office. So it started then and it continued. And the city of Birmingham also adopted that philosophy when they went to the neighborhood association, dividing the city up into neighborhoods so that police officers and community could interact with each other, and they expected the commanders to do that as well. So having people that, even if they don't trust each other right now, if they are open-minded enough to come to the table wanting to seek a solution, not to blame anybody, it's your fault, you did this, you did that, but actually wanting to come and to communicate with one another. Let me hear what you have to say, you hear what I have to say, and let's see if we can have a dialogue and begin to interact with each other.
Just to piggyback on that, I think police officers and police officials need to be careful who they give a gun and a badge to. Everybody, you can't give everyone a badge and a gun. There has to be some better screening than what we're doing right now. You can't put a renegade out there. He has to be a man before he get a gun and a badge. You can't. That gun and that badge does not make you a man, or who you might believe or think you are. Some of the police officers I know have been watching too many John Wayne movies. This is not the Wild Wild West. We do things a little different now. If you're scared of a police official should know that the person that you have in a certain community, if all they're doing is riding through, never getting out speaking to the community, they'll never know the needs of that community. The responsibility of meeting the needs of that community rests and lies on the supervision of those individuals that's out there serving that community. And on any given time during the day, you will find 3 or 4 cars at the Waffle House. You will find 5 or 6 cars at Krispy Kreme. Do you see where I'm going with that?
Yeah.
They're not serving the community. Do you know that criminals in the community will sit there in time when you pass through and will sit there and wait on the next time you come through, and if it's within 1 hour, they have 1 hour to commit a crime before you, as a law enforcement officer, discover that anything has happened. So we have to quit putting individuals in uniforms, quit putting them in communities that they're afraid of, because there are a lot of them that are just afraid. I can tell you a story where I was put in a community where no black folks lived, and that's called the county line in Jefferson County. I was put there for a reason, because I made some folk mad, and they told me, you're going to stay up there, I don't even want you coming out of there to go to lunch. But guess what? That was not my greatest fear. My greatest fear was to get that community to accept me for what my job was, and that is to protect and serve. And as long as I was protecting and serving, then I had no fear. I had houses that I had gone to where people said, don't step in my yard. I took the report on the side of the road. I had no problem with that. But in the long run, I won the confidence of that neighborhood because I was not running away from that same fear that was trying to be instilled in me, not to knock on that door, not to step in that yard. So we have to be able to put folks on the ground that's not afraid of themselves, first of all, and won't be afraid of the people that they're serving.
I noticed that with our sociology and human rights tables, there was a lot of head nodding. What are you all's thoughts on what they said about everything, about neighborhood positioning and how a police officer may think about themselves, all of that?
Well, we've talked about this a little bit before, and I tend to be chatty Cathy about this. I have some past experience. I'm originally from Louisiana and lived here since 2006, and headed back to Louisiana in another year and a half, I hope. So in that experience there, I was involved with a variety of community policing projects, from a project Weed and Seed with the housing, urban development that combined community policing like Ms. Nunn is talking about. And to be able to see police officers, and this was new to me, step down from the Monroe City and come into a housing project, which was predominantly, if not 100%, African American. Again, you may be wondering why I was there. That's another story. But in any case, to see in the newspaper a picture that I love to talk about, I've already told Dr. Ross about this, but just a massive officer, just big biceps, bowed up guy. I think he might have been an NFL guy that came home to roost, I don't know. But in any case, he's front page of the paper, holding little children, kindergarten children, reading books to them in these community neighborhood areas. These were people who were like the population they were serving, because this was an African-American officer. This was also a person who was actually a peace officer. You may have been hearing that term used more frequently now about police officers who are protecting and serving to keep the peace. And that is part of what I would want to reinforce about what Ms. Nunn is saying and what Mr. Moore is saying, is that that familiarity goes a long way, in addition to having folks who are not afraid to serve, because it works both ways. You need white officers in non-white communities unafraid to serve there, just as Mr. Moore was saying, you need to have non-white officers in white communities unafraid to serve. I think we may have made more progress there, a little bit more, and we seem to have had, in my opinion, some backlash as far as white officers in non-white communities. That's just my observation. I know that in the reports that we're hearing about the current events over the last really 2 years that have been in the media, that seems to be part of the issue. That we have a lot of these officers who do happen to be avoiding, perhaps, the engagement with their community, avoiding getting to know the community and the needs of the community, whether they match that population or not. That's essential.
I noticed that you all are speaking a lot on the issue of race, and since you all, since that's the kind of direction I see where that may be going, do you think that it is fair, and when I say fair, there's a lot of conversation about young African-American men being stereotyped in their neighborhoods by police officers unnecessarily. Do you think, and I would like a response for everyone up here, do you think that it's fair for citizens or members of the community to stereotype white male police officers as racist?
Oh, no, I don't think so. Not at all. And I'm not advocating that at all. I hope that that doesn't come across in that way. I'm simply saying that there needs to be, like Mr. Moore was saying, there needs to be good training, training in recognizing stereotypes, no matter what stereotype a police officer, or even in my case, a human services worker, a social worker, or a counselor needs to have. They need to be aware of what their own personal biases and stereotypes are. That doesn't happen with a nice little 90-minute workshop that you do when you get hired. It doesn't happen with a single course that's set aside as an elective in your curriculum. It doesn't happen as something that you just sort of gain that awareness over time. We don't gain that importance of recognizing personal stereotypes within us to avoid having a negative reaction toward others, being in a controlling position as a police officer or as a social worker, say, who's removing a child from a home because of abuse and neglect. We have those issues in child welfare too. So we have to be more sensitive about the training that we provide and make sure that it is comprehensive enough that it truly makes a difference. We don't change, I tell my cultural diversity students this all the time, we do not change our attitudes that we were raised up with. Those things are intense. We call that socialization, right? And so those things are intense. We often don't recognize them. They are subconscious. And when you're in a volatile situation, like some of our officers may find themselves in, such as perhaps Ferguson, if we knew the whole scope, right, with Mr. Brown. When you're in a situation like that, who knows that that white officer may not have had some sort of subconscious, latent racialization, a stereotype about this young man that provoked enough, bam, you've got catastrophe. And that's what we have to be more deliberate about training in our competence in working with people who are not exactly like us. And that's my experience and opinion about it.
Since you mentioned something about that shooting, Ms. Nunn, has you ever been in a position where, or have any of your officers ever been in a position where they had to shoot and kill someone? And if so, kind of help us use that as a reference point for us to kind of tell us what happened, that force was necessary.
Unfortunately, yes. there were incidents where officers had to shoot and kill someone. To kind of piggyback on what was just said, we have to realize that we all come with some type of prejudices. Anybody said they don't have any, they're telling a lie. We all have some. And when I was in the chief's office, if I got a call at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning regarding a police shooting, I'll be honest with you and say one of my first questions was, tell me the race of the officer and the race of the person that was killed. Because that would tell me a lot about what I was going to have to deal with. It bothered me that, and it still does, that people will come at you when it involves a police officer shooting someone. But when you have your shootings every day that's claiming many more lives, you just sit by and say, well, don't say anything unless it's my family member or somebody that I know. And those far outnumber any police shootings. I never met any of my officers that said, you know, I want to get up this morning and I'm going to kill somebody. Unfortunately, had to use force. They were investigated. Birmingham, at one time we investigated our own shootings. We now turn them over to the Alabama Bureau of Investigation. Let them do the impartial investigation. Present the evidence to the district attorney's office, who will decide if there's enough evidence there to say that it was justifiable or whether there was a criminal act. I can't recall anybody ever being prosecuted involving a police shooting. So it's something that unfortunately happens. I thank God I never had to shoot anybody. And I would say, I don't know if you have citizens police academies in this area, but if you ever have the opportunity to take advantage of any agency offering a citizens police academy, please do so. And I hope that they take you to the firing range, because that was part of what we had. And one lady, we won her over. She was a child of the 60s. She hated police. She was African American. Her brother was a commander with the Birmingham Police Department. That didn't matter. But after she went to the Citizens Police Academy, it changed her whole view of what the Birmingham Police Department was like at that time. Because she had a chance to see what officers have to do. And when they take them to the firing range, you don't actually get to shoot a weapon, but you have a shooting simulator. And that shooting simulator will really open your eyes, because people will say, well, you should have done this, you should have done that, when there's a shooting. But when they have to make that decision, just like that, as to whether to shoot somebody or not, I can't tell you how many news reporters they've shot, because they turned with that camera, bam, they shot. How many ladies carrying groceries that they've shot, because you have that split second to make that decision as to whether to use force or not. Now I have 2 sons, and when they were growing up, I told them, yes, you are African American males. People will have stereotypes. You will run across officers, you run across good officers, and you run across bad officers. I trained them, if you get stopped by the police, keep your hands on the wheel, or put them out the window so they can see them. Respond to what they ask you to do, because officers are taught to watch the hands. Because it doesn't take long for somebody to pull a weapon, throw a knife, do whatever with their hands. Just a split second. So I told them, keep your hands on the wheel, don't move them unless that officer tells you to, so that they can see that you are not a threat and they are in control of that situation.
And if I can say something, you hit it right on the point. It starts at home. Mm-hmm. I noticed you was teaching your children at a young age, and that's where the problem is. It starts at home. You know, so we have to grab our children. You have to let them know they're going to be somebody someday. And when I go and speak to the alternative schools on every Tuesday, and there's a lot of stuff going at home. You know, and you know, some kids be coming up and say both parents on meth and a lot of things going on. So they kind of react, but they're reacting in a negative way because they're not getting no love at home. A lot of children are raising themselves, you know, and the sayings, when I was young, if my next door neighbor seen me do something wrong, they had the right to discipline me. But now they want to disrespect you, you know, so we got to go back to old school. I mean, and then our churches need to get involved. Hello? We got every black church in every city, and we have all our children are suffering. You know, so instead of complaining about it, you got to be about it. And we must vote. That is the power. You got to know the law. You got to know the law. That's very important. You know, so I like what she said, because it actually starts at home. You know, we can talk about all these police shootings and all that, but when she said that she told her sons what to do, you must do, especially being African American. Bottom line, because I don't know what goes in the white community, but I know that goes in our community, and we lost our love. There's no unity, disrespecting our black women, you know, all these videos. You know, when I went home from school, first thing you do your homework, do your chores. First thing you know, kids go home, they playing Xbox. I mean, it's just unreal, you know. Show up at the PTA meetings, be in your kids' lives. But I know it's different situations that's going on, but just the fact that we had a state of emergency, you know, so that's why when kids go out and do some things or whatever is out, basically what's going on, or they getting taught racism at home, you know. So it's a lot of hatred going on in this country, but why? That's what I don't understand. And like what the minister said, when it's our time to leave this earth, you want to go to the right place, bottom line.
You know, we have a lot of young people that are in the room right now. Unfortunately, what took place in Ferguson did take place with an 18-year-old man, someone who was just, or 18-year-old young man, teenager, however you can categorize it. He was scheduled to go off to college the Monday after he was shot and killed. Do you think that there needs to be some type of lesson, some type of teaching with young people on how to respect police officers? Because the one thing that I've had before we started putting this form into the works, I had a lot of police officers tell me that young people especially don't know how to respect them. When police officers approach them, they cuss them out, or they spit at them, or they use all type of just very inappropriate language that children should not be using. So trying to work this on both sides of the fence here, I know people can make cops out to be the bad guys, but at some point, do you think that young people need to learn how to respect authority?
Of course, of course. We need policemen. We need policemen in this country, and it must be a respect factor, you know. And I'm kind of disappointed, you know. Again, the facts will come out, but you know, I'm just hoping that when you get approached by the police, you need, like the lady said, you need to raise your hands, obey by each command they give you, because if you're not guilty, you're not hiding nothing. You know, so like when I got stopped, I ain't got nothing to hide. I knew what I was supposed to do, but a lot of young people is not hearing that these days because they fear the fear action, and they see what's going on across the country about the police brutality, racial approach. So they have given up on our law officials. You know, so we have to kind of bring, it's too much a gap going on, so we got to bring that gap back to close how it used to be, looking at police as protect and serve, not as the enemy. You know, so I can say in our community, look as the enemy, you know. So, you know, we see the police, why you running? You know, why you running? It's a fear factor, or have you did something? It's just the fact that it's just sad what's going on, Ed, and I'm just hoping that this is not going to solve the problem. Go into your community, unite, you know, do community watch meetings and stuff, and just let everybody know, hey, we're in this together. You know, if you see something happen next door, report it, you know, and things like that. But of course, it got to be a respect factor. Right now, there is a big gap.
You know, one of the things that parents should never do, and I always hated when they did this, you see an officer in the store, your kid's acting bad, I'm going to have that police officer get you. And now you just started destroying that relationship, because now instead of trusting that officer, that child needs help. Well, my mom, my dad said they're going to put the police on me. Start to build a trusting relationship. There is a program, I guess it still goes on, that was sponsored, I believe, by Allstate, called The Law in You, which is designed for young people. It had different things that they taught young people on their level about the law. And it calls police and officers, the officers and the kids to interact with each other. But also, if they're getting at home, don't respect the police, you know, the old word was 5-0. I was teaching a Sunday school class yesterday, and they told me the new word was 12. So, you know, they changed the words, the warning sign. I didn't know. 12, what does that mean? Well, I don't know, but that's just the word they use, okay? So you have to be that example of respecting the police too. And we know that, you know, every officer is not a good officer. It's just like any other profession. You've got the majority going to be good, but there's going to be somebody that's bad that reflects badly on everybody else. And when we run across those, that was, you know, my goal, and another goal I had with the police department was to get to the internal affairs unit, because if there was a bad officer, I wanted to be able to deal with that as well. Because you're representing the whole department. So if you have the information, you have the proof that somebody is out there, and there's video cameras, cell phones everywhere now. And you got that information, take it to your law enforcement, or if you don't trust them, take it to the DA's office or the news media, they'll get it out if that person is doing something that's wrong.
And also, as a police agency, we ought to have some things in place, like a PAT, or where there's sports events where we can, you know, ask young people to come and play baseball or play basketball, or something that will involve them, and let them see that the law enforcement community is just not out there so much to bring harm to them. Today, you know, young people, I'm almost in agreement with them. Who can you trust? Your parents are not going to raise you. Now you want the law enforcement community to do it. It brings a hardship on us, because you know, that balance is just not there that we can provide for your children. So if your kids are not respecting you at home, they're not going to respect us out on the street. And when something happens, don't come trying to say how sweet and kind your child was, and you know that child was as wicked as he could be when he was in your presence. So all I'm saying to you is, the law enforcement community, we really do a lot to encourage young people. It may not be seen because of some of the bad apples, but we're still